One of the first things I wanted to talk about was the Valley Howlers at the Browns property, and I wanted to get your take on it, Will.
September 10th, 2014. I'm not sure what we're hearing, but it doesn't sound like a coyote. It's making the dogs go nuts. Hear that distant one? What is that?
I wish those cars were coming by.
They're howling back and forth. Sounds like a person, doesn't it? I wish the other one would respond. That one came fast, though. Remember when I came out here and I said I heard one by the river? I could hear that, but so far away. That was closer, huh? Now she's further away. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's very interesting. There's been so many vocalizations come out of that area. There's a huge range of noises. And I don't know what else could possibly be making noises like that other than Sasquatches.
Yeah, I swear Sarah gets like hours and hours and hours of audio recording. I'm going to try and help her in the next couple months, try and get more video, some video production going on out there. See if we can't capture something more than just beyond audio, because the audio is cool, but it's even cooler to get something on video.
Yeah, we need some stuff to, like you said, some visuals to back up that audio.
Yeah, and I got a GoPro coming, so I'm probably going to strap that thing on and live like a wild man out there on their property, see if I can't gather something.
I really need to get up there with you sometime.
Oh, man, you would go nuts up there, man. You would go completely nuts up there. But, it's one of those places, too. I know a lot of people think that, they're just hoaxing stuff, and I'm telling you, they're really not. Like, I've been up there and nothing's happened, and then I've been up there and all kinds of stuff has happened. And it's kind of hit and miss when you go up there. But when stuff does happen, everyone's accounted for. And what you're hearing off in the distance isn't human, and it isn't any other known animal. It's just a really unique property, I think, out there that the Browns have. So as soon as I get that GoPro, I think I'm going to go out there, strap that thing on. I'd love to get you out there, Will.
Yeah, I really would love to get up there myself. Hopefully that'll happen soon.
Yeah, hopefully that'll happen real soon. Did you see the Arizona Department of Transportation picture?
I did see that picture, yes.
I don't know what's going on with the Arizona Department of Transportation, but what happened is they captured on their video what looked like 5 or 6 apes coming out of the tree line, kind of towards the highway. And at first when I saw it, I thought, wow, this is crazy, man. I can't believe they captured something like this. But Steve Alcorn, he did kind of a debunking of it. He went out to their website. It was funny because, like, at 9:05, the picture was, you see what looks like a bunch of Sasquatches coming out of the property or coming out of the wood line next to the highway. And then at 9:10, none of them have moved. So then right there, I thought, this is BS.
You know, I wonder sometimes if these people don't, it's either a joke or they're putting misinformation out, you know, to try to make people sort of, you know, say, wow, look at this. They got pictures of Bigfoot, and it isn't. Later on it comes out, you know, that it was some kind of hoax or something to sort of, you know, put egg on everybody's face.
Yeah, I guess I don't get that. It seems like somewhat, maybe I'm just lazy, man. And I'm a guy that works like 24 hours a day. I think I sleep like 3 hours a night. That just seems like so much work. Like, why? And it's funny, I look at a lot of these hoaxes, and it's like, why? It's like this other one that they had this video. I posted it up on the blog, but it's all these Chinese tourists visiting Canada, and it looks like a Sasquatch, like, scooping something, and they're all just snapping pictures.
Right. Yeah, I've seen that.
And it's like a BS. It's completely BS because it's some
it's baloney.
Tourist company trying to get people into that area. He's even created like a Bigfoot app. Like, you can take your phone and scan the wood line, and it will fill in a Bigfoot in the video. But it's like, why go to that? I don't get it. You know what I mean? Like, why?
Well, I think that's the bottom line with any of these hoaxers. It's like, you know, you have to really find out what their motivation is. And in a situation like that, there must be some, well, tourist dollars are at stake. So you can, you know, go that extra mile, and it's popular, so you get a lot of people that'll take advantage of that, you know, that'll buy into it.
Yeah, it's kind of like Rick Dyer coming out with this third body he shot, and he's got a picture of him.
Yet again.
Yet again. But you know what I mean? It's like, you take a guy like that, and I almost want to sit him down and go, hey, man, if you put forth the effort into this, into making money, you would be a millionaire.
Yeah, no kidding. Why do you keep on this? And you look at that thing, for those who haven't seen it, you know, go look it up, and he's holding its hand. The hand's the same size as his hand. If it was a real Sasquatch, it'd be, you know, 4 times that size. It's just stupid that, you know, why he keeps doing this stuff is a real mystery in itself.
Pretty hilarious. So it's like, you know, if you put that focus into making money at something legitimate, you'd be a millionaire by now, man. Like, I just, you know, I know times are I know times are tough out there. It's tough to find a job and whatnot, but I mean, come on.
I know, is he even making any money at this point? You know, unless somebody's paying him to do all this stupid stuff. And then again, what's the motivation for that?
Yeah. Well, first I want to welcome to the show Logan. And Logan had a pretty interesting encounter, and I invited him to the show to share his encounter. So I want to go ahead and welcome Logan to the show.
Okay, Logan. Well, tell me how long ago your encounter was.
8 years, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, it would be July of 2006.
Okay, and what part of the country, if you don't mind telling us?
It was the northern panhandle of West Virginia, kind of the part that's stuck between Ohio and Pennsylvania.
Well, tell us what you were doing just prior to the incident happening, and then take us into it step by step as it happened.
Okay. Well, that day, I had spent the day in a little place called Big Run, West Virginia, which is pretty much just a few houses around a road deep in rural West Virginia, the county I was in. Not a lot of housing. I mean, there was really only 3 or 4 people that lived in this quote-unquote town. I didn't have a vehicle at the time. I had wrecked my first car, so I was getting around by ATV. So I had ridden my 4-wheeler ridgetop out there and stayed there all day and night. And this was about 12:45, 1 o'clock in the morning. I was heading home. Before I had left, I was kind of getting ribbed about being afraid to ride back by myself. It was actually probably only the second time I think I had ever ridden that like that at night by myself. The whole way. Usually I either had somebody with me or it wasn't quite, it wasn't as dark and as late as it was. So I was already kind of nervous about it, but I just played it off like you're being silly, you're not acting like an adult that you should be now that you're 19, that's how I thought back then. So I got over it and I decided I'm going to go, better just to get it over with. What would normally have been about a 10 or a 15-minute car ride is more like 35 to 45, depending on how fast you go by four-wheeler and ridgetop riding. So I left probably about 1:15 in the morning, nothing but deer trails and dirt roads up to get to these ridgetop roads. I'm on the road probably about 15, 20 minutes by myself, like I said, on a four-wheeler, pitch black. I mean, the moon was up, but it was overcast that day, so there were like periods where it would be lit by the moon, but then it would get covered up, and then it would uncover. So there was light at some times, and then it would get overcast, and the light would kind of dim. You'll see by the light, but it was definitely diminished when the overcast would come by. About 15 or 20 minutes in, I come to a part on the road that is particularly narrow. The road itself didn't narrow. The foliage and the brush and briars and things on the side of the road weren't kept well, and they were growing up to the road. So it was kind of a part that you had to slow down on, or else you would risk, getting caught by a briar or something as you're driving past. So I'm coming up to this part, and something in my mind told me that I needed to stop and check and make sure that I had everything. I had a cell phone, I had my wallet, I had a set of house keys. I just wanted to make sure before I got further than this halfway point to slow down, check all my pockets, pat them down, make sure I had everything. So I come up to this point. I'm not quite in the thick of that part. I'm actually right before it, probably 10 to 15 feet before this part in the path where the brush comes out. So I come to a stop. I'm idling. I was satisfied that I had everything, and I was in first gear because I had downshifted. And I pushed in on the accelerator, and in first gear on a four-wheeler, I'm not going to get into this with great detail, but you have a lot of power but not a lot of speed. So I pushed in on it just a bit, and I was coasting very slowly down the path. And out of the right side of out of the right, okay, the way I'm driving, the hillside is going up to my right, and then it levels out to the road, and then it's downhill to my left. Out of the right side, or my right ear rather, up on the right side of the hill there, I hear a loud crack. Definitely a branch. I didn't really think much of it at the time, as most people wouldn't. I'm in the woods in West Virginia, and there's things out there. As long as I keep moving, I'll be okay. I hear the loud snap. I kind of disregarded it because it was a little way. It was up the hill a little ways. So I'm still coasting forward. I come to a stop because I'm checking again. I'm using my right hand to check my pocket this time because I thought I never checked my right pocket or my, checking that, and I kind of coast to a stop. And I hear movement. I hear scuffling. Like, I've heard, I've hunted. I've heard people walk through the woods. I've heard what it sounds like when a human being, doesn't lift their boot all the way or something, and they kind of, scrape against the ground and scrape a leaf, or, you hear scuffling, like you hear leaves getting pushed around with things like that. I heard that. I heard it twice. I just heard like a, up in the woods, just off the path. It's closer to me than the branch snap was. So I thought maybe there were two things out there. And I didn't really think of it much. I accelerate slowly again, and I kind of accelerated and let off again because I was getting ready to go. I was getting settled on the four-wheeler. I was kind of like, I just shifted my weight around, checking my pockets. I was getting comfortable. I shuffled around a little bit. I came to another stop, and I'm in the thick of it now. I'd moved ahead about that 12 or 15 feet, and I was in the thick of the brush at this point. And when I let off the accelerator, the second time I came to a slow, it slowed me down dramatically because, like I said, I was in first gear, so your accelerator gives you a lot of reaction. Like if you push on it, you're gonna get rocked back, and you're gonna go if you hold down on it. Well, I kind of did that. I kind of rocked forward into the brush a little bit. I stopped to check again, and right when I stopped, sorry, this is the hard part for me. This is the part that I remember. Coming out of the bush on my right side, near where I heard the shuffle, it didn't come soaring. I mean, it didn't come like in an arc. It came straight out from the top of the bush. I heard it hit the sticks and the stuff in the brush. I heard the noise before I saw this. I would call it a rock, but it was not a rock that a human could pick up. This was a large boulder, a large rock about the size of I would say a female basketball, about that round. It wasn't perfectly round, of course, but it was about that size in diameter. Sure. It came out at a straight angle, level with my head. It passed within 12 inches of my face. I felt the wind off of it. It passed that close to me. I mean, it was a large rock, of course. I could have been further back and probably still felt the wind off of it. And it passed in front of my head less than a foot, and it landed on the side of the path with a loud thud. When that happened, it was like I didn't connect the two things at first. At first, I thought, rock slide, here? How did that rock just roll down that hillside and bounce and come out at that angle? Like the angle wasn't making sense because it didn't bounce, it didn't roll, it didn't soar at an arc. It came straight out and passed horizontally in front of my face and landed on the road. And I was shocked for a second because I was, like I said, I was sitting there and I'm trying to piece this together. Like how did this happen? And this is all happening, in a matter of seconds in my mind. I just saw it pass in front of me. My eyes are wide. I'm gripping the four-wheeler handles at this point. I'm staring at this rock. And I heard a growl. Hello? It was a growl. I mean, it was so deep and low that the bass from this thing vibrated the bones in my chest. Like I felt my rib bones vibrating like a tuning fork, like how you hit them and they vibrate and you harmonize off that tone. The growl was so low and so close, I guess, that I felt it pass through my body. Like I felt the bass and the vibration from this thing hit me in the chest. It was just like I can't get near as low as that, obviously, but it was just like like low, like angry, like almost like a man about to start a fight. Like you would hear like a guttural growl, It was, when that hit me, I don't remember reacting. I heard the growl, saw the rock, and just punched that accelerator. I was in first at the time, so I took off, and I'm shifting. And before I get to what happened next, I just want to point out the reason, thinking back on it so much, and I've hardly even really been able to talk to anybody about this. I've just, writing it is one thing, but actually speaking about it and telling somebody who cares to listen is completely different. And I'm sorry if you can hear my voice, breaking or anything, but it's really hard for me to think about this.
No, that's all right. Take your time.
If I hadn't stopped, I would be probably in those missing 411 books that I have sitting on my bookshelf right now, because it would have killed me. It would have knocked me either completely cold and off of the four-wheeler or killed me flat out, and nobody probably would have ever found anything of me other than the four-wheeler assuming it wasn't rolled down the hill or something. You know, who knows what would have happened. But if I wouldn't have let off that accelerator for that last little stretch before I went into that bush, that rock would have smashed me in the side of the head, probably flat out just killed me. With the force that it came out, sorry, I get down the road. I'm probably a quarter of a mile. There's a few turns. There's no sharp turns. It was just small turns in a rather straight road, you know, just kind of lefts and rights to go around the bend of the hill. I get about a quarter of a mile down the road. I had forgotten. I had been out riding all day, like I said. I rode out to my friend. I was riding back, and I had forgotten to switch. There's just a little knob on the side of the four-wheeler. It was a utility that says main and reserve and off. You can turn your gas tank off if you're not using it. I had forgotten to switch to reserve before I left because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to have enough fuel to make it all the way home. So I get about a quarter of a mile down the road, and I was, you know, full on the whole way. Didn't slow down. Spended all my gas in the main fuel tank. So, you know, in my mind, I'm not thinking about this. I'm thinking about the growl. Of course, I'm thinking about the rock that was just thrown at my face or my head, and what could have been behind that rock to throw it that fast and that level. I make it a quarter of a mile down the road. I sputter because I'm out of fuel. I come to a rolling stop. There are no houses near me. There are houses on this road now, but at this point, at this time, this is before the fracking boom, so there was no truck traffic. There were no gas wells. There was nothing out here. I mean, this was about as isolated as you can get in my county. I'm at a dead stop. The only bright lights I have are shining directly in front of me because they're mounted on the front of the four-wheeler. All I've got behind me are red brake lights illuminating behind me, and when that thing stopped, or when the four-wheeler stopped, and sputtered to a stop, I'm looking over my shoulder, you know. I'm looking behind me, but I can't see very far because all it was red light. And red light's designed, you know, not to travel very far. That's why the military uses it, you know, when they're in the field. It's hard to see from a distance. And I'm in complete silence. And, you know, at night out there, it's not unusual to have quiet nights, but you still hear, you know, your normal noises. There's more animals out there at night than there are during the day usually. So I'm sitting there and I'm in complete silence. And I don't know if it was just because I was on a loud four-wheeler and I had no ear protection and now I was in the quiet and I was adjusting to that, but I don't think it was that because I didn't hear any other animals. I didn't hear anything. I'm sitting there. At this point, I've reached up, and I knew what happened right away. And when you switch your fuel tank like that, you have to try to start it for a few seconds before it'll catch. It has to pull that fuel in from the reserve tank. I've switched over to reserve, hitting the ignite button to start, and it's kind of, you know, it's going, it's pulling the fuel in, but I've just got to keep doing it, you know. And while I'm sitting there, I've probably been there for 15, 20 seconds at this point, half a minute, and I just burnt a quarter of a mile of road on this thing. More than that, probably. I was probably between a quarter and a half of a mile away from where I had the rock thrown at me. And behind me, this part I remember too, of course, behind me, coming from my left now, not the right, it had switched from the hillside going up to my right. It had crossed over somewhere. Behind me was on the left side of the road now, on the downhill side where I had even less visibility because there was a ton of foliage and brush in the way. I heard loud, heavy, and, you know, like the Jurassic Park reference where you can see the water, like, you know, vibrating from the footsteps of the T-Rex. That's what it felt like. You know, if there had been a cup of water sitting in front of me, I'm sure that's what would have happened because I heard I heard one set of bipedal footsteps steps, I guess you could call them, but they were booming, so they weren't really steps. To me, they sounded like, deliberate, like I'm making as much noise as I can. Crashing, like thudding toward me from the downhill slope of the road. And it's coming toward me. It's heading my direction, and it is probably no more than 30 yards behind me, 25 to 30 yards behind me on the other side of the road from where I got the rock thrown at me. When I heard that, everything hit me all at once, like the fear. I mean, I had the fear and the adrenaline before, but when I realized that I hadn't escaped yet and I was still being followed, everything hit me at once. I retched off the side of the four-wheeler. I mean, the adrenaline and the fear and everything hit me, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I was petrified. I vomited all over the ground out of pure fear. When I heard those steps, I shoved the choke all the way up, and I hit the ignition, and the four-wheeler started up. I'm sorry. I turned the choke down, and I floored it all the way home. I'm feeling sick now, actually. I'm sorry if you can hear that, but it's coming back to me.
That's all right. Take your time. Take your time. Relax.
I floored it home. I never rode again at night. The rock that was thrown at me sat on the side of that road for 2 years before, like I said, the fracking boom came in, and all of those roads were being used as access roads by, big trucks. So they naturally widened them, and that's when the rock was moved, was when they widened these roads. But it sat there for probably 2 years before anything ever happened to it. So that's how I knew I wasn't crazy. I would ride it during the day, but I would never be out there during night again. And every time I would pass by that spot, I would see that rock. I would pass with a new awareness. Go ahead.
Sure. Do you know if anybody else saw or heard anything in that area?
I do. This is within, I would say, 6 months of the only report that's on BFRO in my county. It happened within 5 miles of the location. I would say even closer than that. I'll just tell you the county. I'm not worried about it. It's Wetzel County, West Virginia, and Christmas Tree Nursery that sits, like I said, within 5 miles of that position. And they had reported hearing loud yells, loud screams near them, circling their camp. And this, this wouldn't have been but 1 or 2 ridge tops away from me. So, and that's all dense, like woodland. There's no housing in between there and there. So anything out there could move undisturbed and protected. But yeah, I made it home, and that was about, I told my parents. They wanted to believe me, but they're the kind of people I think that it would have to happen to them. Or they do believe it, but they don't want, they don't want to actively believe it because they're afraid.
Right.
And, yeah. And I received a lukewarm reception. Some people believed me, some people didn't. But, I would always tell them the rock is right out there on the road. Go look at it. Tell me if you could pick that thing up. And I did. I jumped down, and I tried to pick that thing up myself. And it would have taken 4 men, it would have taken 4 big guys to probably pick this thing up and throw it away.
Was that an area that people hunted deer often?
Yes. The whole area is really. Some of it is part of the Lewis Wetzel hunting, it's like public ground, I guess, that you can hunt on. This, I believe, was private property, but the way it is around there, there could have been people hunting in every direction of this spot. If it wasn't hunted, there was hunting all around it, that particular plot.
Yeah, with the 2 directional things, you had the rock thrown at you from the right on the upper part of the hill, and then you heard the noise on the lower side on your left.
Mm-hmm.
Makes me wonder if there weren't more than one there. And it's possible they were ticked off because you disturbed a hunt, sort of like what happened to Wes and Woody.
Very, very possible. From listening to you guys and your show, I've come to the conclusion, and I actually heard this stated the other night, that these things they can move stealthily through the woods. You're only heard,
Oh, yeah.
they're only heard if they want you to
If they,
hear them.
right, exactly.
So, yeah, I think I either disturbed them in the beginning because I heard that branch crack, and I think that was a warning. That was either a warning to me or that was a warning to someone else. And maybe...
And we could speculate a lot, but I was thinking to myself, you know, if one was on the right and another was on the left, and the one on the left was making a lot of noise, it made me think about the possibility of it driving you into an ambush. And again, that's just speculation, but it does make you wonder.
Absolutely. I think I was on the Mooney that night because there's no positive outcome for me getting hit in the head with a rock that heavy. I mean, that's the point.
Yeah, it's possible you were in the ambush set up for possibly deer or something else they were hunting.
Have you ever heard of them trying to kill a deer with a rock or anything like that? I know they throw rocks. I've just, maybe it was just a rock throwing towards me to scare me off. But
yeah, it's possible. Again, there's lots of ways we can speculate on what they were doing, but that's definitely an aggressive behavior, that's for certain.
Right. And then the charging, it was a definite charge from when I'd stopped. Like maybe they thought I'd stopped and I was coming back.
I think at least we know they weren't very happy with your presence there.
Oh, no, absolutely not. The growl told me that. Even subconsciously, I think we're still human I think we're still animal at a certain level, and we know enough to hear, another animal's noises.
Right.
And know that we're not welcome there, that we've intruded,
Yeah, I think anytime you hear a growl, you don't have to have experiences with a growl. It could be the first time you heard a growl, and that's right off the bat, that's something to back away from, or there's danger right there. I think it's interesting. Have you ever heard of Robert Alley? He wrote Raincoat Sasquatch. He has a story in there about a couple that was chased down a mountain on a four-wheeler. And it kind of sounds similar to your story. They never stopped. They just kept going. But this thing was a good 60, 70 yards behind them, and they were just full out as fast as it would go. And this thing had actually chased them all the way back to where they were loading up the four-wheelers. So it makes you wonder if maybe the four-wheeler pissed them off. I guess it's kind of like what Will says. We can speculate all day long, but at the end of the day, it was probably a good thing you decided to move along and not stick around to see, because the outcome probably wasn't going to be good.
No.
And, there might be something to that four-wheeler thing, Wes, because I know of a couple other stories of these things chasing people on four-wheelers, so maybe there is something to it.
I can tell you that if there were two different Sasquatch out there that night, very possible. I obviously didn't at the time, but I can tell you that if it was the same Sasquatch that threw the boulder or rock at me, it covered, close to a half a mile in probably, 15 seconds, if that. Like, I was down that road and out of gas, and it was already closing in on me. And I don't think if I would have gotten that ATV started the way I did with using the choke, which I should have done from the first place, but I don't think I would have made it, because they would have closed on me in a minute, and the time and the speed that I would have been starting at. I wasn't on a racing bike or anything. It was a utility, so they weren't built for speed, It would have easily caught up to me. If it cleared that much speed or that much air distance in so short a time, it could have easily caught up to me and probably plucked me right off that ATV.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. That's something people don't really grasp, is how fast they can move. I've heard them run, and, we heard back in 1976, three of us heard one run from our right to our left going inside the brush alongside of a gas pipeline access way. And it covered probably 150, 200 yards and only took about 7 or 8 steps. We heard it boom, 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 boom. I mean, it was just like what you described, that loud kind of booming noise when the feet would hit. And it was incredible how fast it moved and the distance it could cover.
Yeah, there's no way I could have outrun it. I don't think anything or anybody could.
No.
It probably could have lifted me as well as the four-wheeler up and carried us off. I mean, I have no doubt about that. Yeah, so that's really it for my experience. It completely it messed with me for the longest time.
I really do appreciate you coming on, Logan, and sharing your experience. It's terrifying. I can imagine that rock going past your head.
Yeah, I think I would have crapped myself if I had a rock fly by my head like that.
No kidding.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to comment. At least they may or may not have. I didn't, but I did vomit, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I don't blame you. Thanks so much, brother.
Yeah, man, appreciate it. Talk to you guys later.
Really getting going.
It was interesting. Very interesting, yeah. Yeah, I don't know what it is about four-wheelers, man. I know of a couple of stories, and you mentioned the one in the Rob Valley's book with these things chasing four-wheelers. It must piss them off somehow.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if he wouldn't have stopped when he stopped, if that rock would have hit him in the head.
It's very possible.
I would have been game over at that point.
Oh, he would have been done. A rock that size?
And nothing like driving back up the trail and seeing that rock every time. God,
yeah, it's a reminder.
Terrifying, man. So I was contacted by a gentleman on Facebook that sent me this encounter story involving Mr. Businger. And I reached out to him and wanted to hear the story of what went on his property. A lot like what you hear on the show, Will. You know, people say these creatures are banging on the house. He had a real strange encounter, but it comes with a twist. So when you listen to a story, listen for the twist in the story. But I wanted to go ahead and welcome Mr. Bissinger to the show. And so if you would, maybe start from the beginning and tell us what happened out on your property.
It was the middle of the night, and we started hearing howling, like a dog howling. It kept on and kept on, and finally there was something beating against the house, and it was hitting hard enough that it was rattling the dishes in the cabinet. I had a couple of dogs that they were just barkers, and they were barking, but this whatever it was, this first night was beating on the wall, so we called the sheriff's department. Sheriff's department all came out. We had 12 cars in the driveway. That was the first night. The sheriff's department stayed at our house, and you could hear him back in the woods howl, but he wouldn't come back up to the house any. So the dawn came, and everybody left, and I went to work, and my wife went about her day, and that night we got home, and we were watching TV, and the howling started again, and so we called 911 right off the bat, because we figured it was going to be a repeat. Well, the sheriff's department didn't show up very quickly, because for reasons I don't know, but he got up to the house and was beating on it again, and different sides of the house howling and beating, and we had pretty much a full night of it that night. The sheriff did come by a couple of times, but that was about the size of it. He stayed 5-10 minutes, and then he'd leave. Third day, a friend of mine had guard dogs, and he said he could put a couple of them out there, and he wouldn't get to them, and I said, that'd be great. So he staked out 2 of his guard dogs out there on the property. And the third night came, and the howling started, and terrible noise came from the backyard, dogs yelping, but he jerked the bottom jaw off of them, and then jerked all the 4 limbs off of both those guard dogs. And then he went back to beating on the house and howling and carrying on. We called the sheriff again, and that night they posted a man out there where we didn't have him up there at the house. You could just hear him howling. And fourth night came, and it was real chaotic. He was emboldened last night. He beat hard, he howled hard, he tore sun trim off of the corners of the house. He was angry that we were still there. That night finally got over with, and the sheriff got back with us and told us that that was his grandmother's house, and that he had grown up into, and he had just decided that he was going home, and the home he knew wasn't there anymore. The grandparents had passed. That's where we had bought the property. So fifth night came, nothing happened. And the sixth and seventh night, nothing happened. We were living in Vidor, and down in the middle of the interstate, going toward Port Neches, there's this scruffy, bearded, long-haired man walking down the center of the interstate. The police picked him up after they could do anything for him, and he said, yeah, he was Jesus Christ. And they took him back to the mental institution, and that was the end of it.
Yeah, it's a crazy story. I mean, here's a power lifter who's gone insane, breaks out of the insane asylum, is attacking your house at night, howling, thinking he's some sort of werewolf, and just basically destroying the place. You know, when the story first got sent to me, everyone was saying this was Sasquatch, and the media was spinning it, saying that it was an escaped mental patient. And I'd gotten all different kinds of resources. So I'm really glad that I got a chance to talk with you to clear it up, that this, you know, obviously wasn't a Sasquatch. It was a large, insane man.
Yeah, a very large, insane man. That was the story of it right there.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to take a quick break. If you're listening to us on SasquatchChronicles.com, hang tight. Next, we'll be talking with a police officer who was sent out on a lot of strange calls that were related to Sasquatch, and he wanted to talk about his experiences on going out on these calls. So if you're listening to us on SasquatchChronicles.com, hang tight. We'll be right back. If you're not, I want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week. Well, I want to welcome Tria to the show. Tria is a police officer in West Virginia who's been called out on different properties and has experienced strange occurrences on different people's properties. And I thought after part 1 and part 2 of our show last week, Will, this would be a great guest to have on, being that he's a police officer and he's gone out to these sites. You know, like Ken was talking about, calling the cops, having the cops come out time and time again. Tria's kind of been in that position, so I was kind of really wanting to hear what he has to say, and welcome Tria to the show.
Hi, Tria. How are you this evening?
I'm all right. How are you, Will?
I'm good. Well, Wes told me that you've been called out on a number of interesting encounters, so I guess I'll just have you tell us what you know and what you want to tell us.
Okay. I guess over the years, most rural police officers or deputies or troopers get called to these type of calls. One really stands out in my mind. I'll give you a little geographic location. Y'all remember the show, The Waltons?
Yeah,
Back in the 70s, Waltons Mountain. In that geographic area. I want to say it was probably September of 2011. We had a young family living in a right rural setting, and I believe the husband, he traveled a lot. I believe he was in construction, went out of the area, and came home on the weekends. Left his wife and a infant, and I think maybe his sister. They lived at the residence normally, and he came home on the weekends, as I said. We got called, me and my partner got called to the house twice, anywhere from 12 midnight to 3 in the morning. I know the other shifts went out there a couple times. The first time my partner and I went out there, it was about 1 in the morning. It was a normal, hey, somebody's messing around, they're knocking their trash cans over. We hear things hitting the back of the house. And like I said, there were two young, early 20 females there with a baby, and they were scared, of course. And we did the walk around with our flashlights and check everything, and everything looked fine, They weren't really overly scared. The first time we went, they just wanted somebody to kind of check it out. The house set on a tract of land that the backyard actually backed up into the national park, which would be the Blue Ridge Parkway. And then if you went just a little, maybe 20 yards past that, there was a clear-cut area where power lines went through. And we walked around. We didn't really see anything. Okay, ma'am, if you hear it again, please call us back. So I guess 2 weeks went by, and we got called back out there again. This time the dispatchers were, normally a cop can tell when a dispatcher dispatches a call if it's serious or not just by the tone in their voice. And the young lady had called back in there to our 911 system, extremely upset, scared to death. So we got out there pretty quick because we knew where we were going this time. She stated that something is throwing rocks or throwing something against the back of their house and hitting the windows, and sounded like throwing rocks on the roof of their house, and they were scared. And they weren't sure if it happened to be people that lived nearby doing it. And nobody really lived very close by. I mean, it was probably a mile either direction. So, I don't think anybody walked up there and did it. So we went and did the normal walk around the house, and there were these rocks that appeared to be maybe softball size on the back deck, I noticed. And that's when I kind of, I grew up in this area all my life, and we've all heard stories about the wood monsters or Bigfoot or Sasquatch or skunk ape, whatever. But when I saw that, I was like, I wonder. And my partner had been a police. He's in his late 50s, and he'd been a deputy for about 30 years at that time. I'd been one about 14, so both of us had time in service. And I said, I'm going to walk on that through this game trail, and I noticed in the backyard, there's a backyard, and then the grass got real high as it went into the national forest, and I could see, there's obviously a trail there. Looked like a game trail. I said, well, I'm going to walk out there and look around. And he said, well, I'm going to go back on the other side of the house, and I'll go back in and talk to the girl. I said, okay. So I start walking down the game trail, and it's, midnight, 1 in the morning. It's just starting to rain. I remember it's raining. I don't know why it stands out in my mind. But I walk out into the, about 20 yards down the game trail, and I walk out into the clear cut. And this is going to sound stupid, I'm sure, but when your hair stands up on your neck?
Right.
That's what happened. That's just froze. I've always been a believer of listening to my intuition. And the hair came up on my neck, and I just stopped. And I was in the clear cut. I just had got into where the power lines got. So I stopped, shining my flashlight. I started shining my flashlight around. And at that time, actually, I pulled my gun because we had Glock 23s, which are 40 caliber. So if it had been, if I would have run into a creature that size, I don't know what it would have done to it. But I did pull my weapon and head down to the side of my leg because I got creeped out. I really did. So I started shining the flashlight around. Could hear some movement. I don't know, maybe 30 yards on up into the across. Maybe it was 10 yards or 15 more yards across to the other tree line, and then maybe another 20 yards inside the tree line. Heard some movement. It could have been a deer. But I did. Once I caught a smell. It was almost like a sulfuric smell that you don't really smell very often. It was like a sulfuric trash, garbage smell.
Sort of out of place for the location.
Very out of place for the location. And I was like, I don't like this. as I said, all my antennas, my self-defense, interior mechanisms have went up. Well, my partner walks up, and I said, "Does this feel right to you?" And he said, "No, it doesn't feel right." He said, "It hadn't felt right since I got out of the car." So we stood there for a while and listened, and it started to rain a little heavier. Then it really started to rain. I guess we stood there for 3 or 4 minutes. Never really heard anything else. Did hear some crashing around, but it could have been deer. But he got the same feelings that I got. And we looked at each other, and, we were partners for a long time. And if you were in the service or in this type of, you can talk to each other just by looking at each other. You don't have to say a word.
Right.
And I looked at him, he looked at me. He said, "We need to get the hell out of here." I said, "You're right, we do." So we backed out. Well, we got lots. I mean, if it is something 9 foot tall and 700 pounds, I can't do anything with it. So
yeah, you don't want to be counter that.
Well, we backed out and went down, and of course we told the lady, "Look, just stay in the house tonight. Do y'all have a firearm?" "Yes, we do." "Okay, but if you have any more problems tonight, please call us. We'll stay in the area." Well, when we left, we went down to this dirt road. It was a cul-de-sac into a wooded area and right up against the national park. And we pulled our cars down there. You know how police officers will pull their cars right next to each other, driver window to talk. We went down there and we were sitting and we were talking. We had turned our lights off, but the cars were running. So we were there 15 minutes. We were probably 400 yards away from the house. And it happened, we started hearing things in the woods again. And that's over our car, the engine's running. So we light everything up, just like, like a Christmas tree. We can light everything up with all the lights on our cars. And we started shining spotlights. And it was heavy, but we never could see it. And it kind of was frustrating because we never could see it, but we weren't going out in the woods to look. Especially at night. And that went on for probably 5 or 7 minutes. And then it stopped just as fast as it started. And I guess we were there another 20 minutes. And we never heard it again. So we left. But I did find out that the other shift how we work 12-hour shifts. So we were on for 2 and off for 2. The other shift that was working while we were off had actually been to the house once or twice in the prior week too. And I wish I could have saved it. I never thought about it at the time. There was a handprint on a window on the back of the girl's house that one of our deputies on the other shift actually took with his cell phone. It was like a bigger handprint. I mean, it was smeared, so you really couldn't tell. And I remember that kind of standing in my head at the time going, that's odd. Because we were all looking at it, and we all looked at each other, and we're like, it could be. I mean, because nobody lives really close near there to walk in the rain and throw softball-sized rocks at this woman's house. But it wasn't very long after that they moved out. And that house has probably sat empty now since then, to be honest with you. I don't think they were having a really good time renting it now. But that's really the one that stands out in my mind, that I think we did come in contact with perhaps that creature, that bipedal primate. I don't know. Like I said, we didn't see it, but it does have all the earmarks of that type of encounter.
I just wanted to add a piece to that is through my own field research for years, and it's been one of the particulars along power lines that's been noted in accounts for years and years that these things are oftentimes seen along power lines.
Really? Are they?
Well, actually, what they do is they're hunting along power lines because animals, deer and such, will use those as natural game trails.
Right. That's true. They do. I never thought of that. We hunt here. I mean, we're in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I mean, where I live, we have the Blue Ridge on one side of the county and the Appalachians on the other side, and the valley in the middle. I mean, the majority of the people around here hunt. But you're right. I didn't think of that the deer do travel those.
Yeah, a lot of people used to think that the Sasquatch would use them as venues of travel, but to me it didn't add up quite right because they can move as easily through forests as they can through open areas, and like most predatory animals, they won't be out in the open, especially in the daytime. And when I started looking into it, I found that they were hunting alongside those places.
So when you're talking, when you and the rest of the cops are sitting around talking about it, or the other shift is talking about it. What was kind of the conclusion everyone came up with?
Well,
Did people think it was just some crazy guy out there running around the woods, or?
One person thought, well, maybe over the years I've run in, when you have new people encroaching on land that families have been there for generations, that even though it's not their land, they've used it for generations, and then all of a sudden somebody buys 2 acres and they stick a double wide in, sometimes problems happen. So at first we're like, it could be that, nobody's really that close to them. We do run into that a lot, but not, and I don't believe it was that in this case. And the handprint kind of threw everybody. Now, we didn't see any footprints, none of the big, human-shaped footprints like you would normally see, what people say they see. It's just, but when the smell hit me, that's when I saw Bigfoot was always been in everybody's mind in the woods, but you never think about it. And I thought, I remember hearing about them throwing rocks. And then when I went out there and I caught that whiff, and that's, of course, my hair stood on end, I thought, I wonder if that's what I'm dealing with here. And then my partner came up, and I looked at him, and I said, what do you think? And he looked at me very concerned. And he said, I think we need to tell out of here. And I said, yeah, I think we ought to back out of here, too. It had it been people, me and him have been in some rough things, and people don't usually scare him. And this had him concerned, and I could see it in his eyes that he was concerned. And that kind of made me worry. I said, yeah, I think we better back out of here because I don't know if we're really dealing with a person or not.
And with your experience, you probably would have known if they were people.
Well, we'd have heard them. And they would have probably been on four-wheelers, or we know a lot of the people in that area, but no one's really close. Everybody's a mile or a mile and a half away. Now, they could have been walking up the power lines, which is easier travel, but I didn't see any. You can see where the deer walk, because we got deer everywhere. I live in a town of 30,000, and I get deer in my yard sometimes.
Yeah, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, for somebody to come up along a power line trail just to throw rocks at a house.
Right, and that's what we were all talking. When I did see the hand print, the picture, I was like, I kind of got, my blood went a little cold. I was like, I've heard of that before, and it is a big, smeary print. You wasn't able to get any kind of dermal ridges or anything like it. It was just a smear. But it was good size. It was probably pie plate size. I don't know. And it was a window that was about 6 feet off the ground. A person could have reached the window, but I'm 6 foot, and I would have had to stood up on a box or something, put my hand there and look in the window. So whatever was there next to the window was tall enough to put its hand on the window and look in. So
yeah, and the size, right, and the size alone sort of rules out people, I would think.
And I would think, unless it was, I can't think of very many people in that area that big. The thing is, we all kind of, and see, once cops know each other, we all know we've all run into questionable things at night. We see lights in the skies at night because we're out there, but you never really run into it like that. Does that make sense? This thing, when I got that smell, and I thought, my God, we got somebody throwing rocks, softball size a little bigger, from at least out here, which is about 40 yards. I'll be there throwing them from over there. That's probably 40 yards. They're hitting the roof, and now I've caught this whiff of smell. Yeah, I'm gonna back out.
Yeah, when things start adding up that way, it's definitely not your run-of-the-mill call, I'm sure.
But the lady, they moved. And I don't think they've had anybody in there since.
Have you ever been called on another call that was anything like that one?
Yeah, we had the other one sticks in my mind. It's probably been 5 or 6 years ago. We had an elderly lady who lived in a very rural area. And, I believe her property was right on the national park. It was, you walked out of her back porch and went 10 feet and you were in a national park. We would get calls from her probably 3, you could almost tell what time of year it was. And I say that, I don't mean to be funny, but you could almost set your clock by it. It would be late fall maybe mid or late fall. She would always have something trying to get into her chicken coop, knocking trash cans over, making noises. She said she would hear things, she would hear people screaming. We never heard any of it, and we'd go out there, and we'd see where somebody maybe had knocked the trash cans over, but we always just kind of chucked it up to a bear. And she was always saying she sees something big going through the bushes, but we never saw any of it. And we never smelled anything like we did on the other one. And we kind of, I think back at it now, maybe that could be, she could have had the same issue because it's not real far. I guess it's 15 miles from where the other thing happened, but it's so rural, and you could walk 15 miles and not get seen at night.
Yeah, for these creatures, that's not a big distance.
And this woman probably didn't live a mile from the Appalachian Trail, maybe 2.
Oh, yeah.
She was right on the AT. The other people were over more towards, and I hate to say Walton's Mountain because it'll give the area away, but over towards that area. But this woman here was right off the AT. I mean, so, and sometimes we think, could be people coming down, the last few hikers of the year coming down, messing with it. You never know. But, every year, and when I first started patrolling that area, the guy I used to work with, he goes, that woman calls us 3 or 4 times every year for the same thing. And you go out there and you always find a little bit of something, but never a whole lot of anything. That's an iffy one. It could have been something. Yeah. Other than
on one hand, without actually seeing it, you can't say that's what it is. It could be any number of things. Right. On the other side of the coin, these things move usually cyclically throughout their ranges. So when somebody sees something at a particular time of year every year, that fits right into exactly the way they move. Usually a window of 30 days.
It was usually late in the year, and it was almost maybe too late for bear because they're usually down by then around here.
Right.
I would think, but we would go out there, and you're like, but then again, it could be the middle of January, and you would have hikers that go missing on the Appalachian Trail, and you'd have to get search parties out. So you never knew, especially with that it being so close, who it could have been. So we always kind of were like, well, but that other, that one really stood out. Those are the two that, like I said, that older lady, that was a chronic one. That had happened for 3 or 4 years. I guess it went on for 5 or 6 years. She passed away, and then you never heard really any more about it. I think her kids, I don't know if they sold the property yet or not. But the other family, like I said, the husband would be away except on weekends, and probably another 2 or 3 weeks after we were out there, they packed up and moved on, and they haven't rented that property since, I don't believe.
That's very interesting.
Like I said, they're not stories like I have heard on y'all's podcast. People have been chased and seen, but we're kind of, cops are cynical anyway normally. So when something like that kind of jumped up on us, I was like, oh my God, this could really be a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch or whatever. This is possible.
And I'm sure it's nothing they prepare you for.
No. We don't have any procedures or guidelines for dealing with a non-human bipedal primate. It's just we're not prepared for it. They prepare you the best they can for, loss of life and things of that nature, car wrecks and what you have to see.
You guys got guns, don't you? You got bullets?
Oh yeah. Just push come to shove. I had 40 rounds on me. He'd have been picking little metal pieces out of him, but what would it have done? That's, I've heard from the podcast. I'm like, they're right.
I'm just playing with you.
I know you are. Of course, we had the M4, but you got to get back to the car to get it. And we're 30 or 50 yards from the car. I'm like, if this thing is fast, it's going to get us, and we're done.
Yeah.
What do you think you'd do if you had a direct run-in with one as a police officer?
Well, it depends on. If it turned and walked away, it would go. I'm not going to chase it. If it turned to come at me and I thought it was going to come at me, I would shoot at it. I know I'd shoot it. That's what I'm trained to do. I'm going to drill it. Of course, I'm from this area. We all hunt, But there again, we're only carrying Glock 23s, which are 40 caliber.
That'd be kind of a tough thing to report, wouldn't it?
Well, there's no real mechanism to report it unless you bring it down. If you bring it down, you've got it. Hey, look, here it is. I'm not crazy. Here's the instant, you're going to have to find another category to put on the instant report, but here it is. Right now, there's no way to really report something like that. I mean, what could it be? Well, it's an unknown creature. That's pretty much, it's a unknown suspicious situation. What else can you put? Especially we didn't see anything. It's just, I don't know. Very few calls do that to me. Very rarely do I get the hair on my neck stand up. And
it probably makes you think twice about these sort of calls now, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And I normally patrol in a rural, mountainous area where we're in and out of the forest or the national forest or the national park. It does. Now when you get out at night when there's an alarm call and no one's home and there's one of the house alarms going off in the middle of the national park and you show up, you go, let me turn all my lights on. Instead of just pulling in with your headlights, you kind of put your takedowns on, your spotlight on, your side lights on, just so you can see before you get out. Before, I usually never did that. So it has changed me to a point. I guess I'm more cautious at night around houses like that. And in the real rural settings, I'm very cautious. Another thing, you don't really want to, during the summer, late summer, early fall, you don't know who's growing weed or has a steel running. And you don't want to step on someone's landmine.
Yeah, that could be a real problem.
They put, little anti-intruder devices that they've made up. You really don't want to step on that.
Right.
So you never really know if you want to go staggering, walking through an unknown, unfamiliar area at night, because people here, they grow weed and they make moons at it. So you never know where, who really, and they usually don't do it on their property. They usually do it in the national forest or in public property, because if you catch them doing it, there's no property to seize because property already belongs to the federal government.
Right.
But if you catch them growing it on their property, well, you can seize their property. In asset forfeiture, you can't do that in a national park. So or they do it on other people's property. So
yeah, and it's crazy for people who don't live in that part of the world or that part of the U.S.
Right.
and think this is crazy talk. I remember I was watching a show about ginseng, or they call it the sing out there.
Oh, yeah, ginseng, yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, and those guys, that's no joke. Those guys do set up booby traps, like military-type booby traps, to where when Tria says landmines, there's no joke. They actually do set up, like, landmines and all kinds of crazy stuff I've never seen before.
People do ginseng here, especially out in the George Washington National Forest. Now, they're not supposed to, of course. They can do it on private land, but you're not supposed to do it in the National Forest. They do it. I don't know if they set a lot of the booby traps up here like they do further south, maybe in Tennessee or North Carolina, those areas. But people here, they do it. I mean, you can tell what time, they're heading out with little shovels and they go into the woods and dig it. But they definitely make shine and grow weed, so you have to keep that in mind when you're just in an unfamiliar area. But ginseng, that's big money. That can be $500 now.
Yeah, I can't believe the amount of money that's it's ridiculous. So Will and I get a lot of reports from a lot of cops.
Okay.
And we get a lot of reports from a lot of cops who kind of like the situation you're talking about, except for they'll continuously go out to a property to investigate. I think a guy went out one time. He took pictures of a handprint. He got pictures of tracks.
Okay.
And he was getting more and more involved in this whole situation. You probably heard him on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was down in, I think it was Missouri, but he was down,
right,
and he got contacted by a government agency that basically told him, we'll take it from here. They wiped out the 911 calls. He was eventually booted out of the force.
I did. Yes, I did. I heard.
Will and I have heard this over and over and over again. Even cops we haven't had on air talk about this, how they go out to these rural properties based on a 911 call. Then they get called out again, then they get called out again, and they start really investigating on what's going on out at these properties. And then some government agency shows up. I mean, this all sounds like crazy conspiracy type stuff, but what you've heard on the air, what you've heard on the air is like 1% of the people that Will and I have actually talked to. I'm talking law enforcement,
right,
of guys that say they go out to. Have you ever heard anything like that, or I hate to compare it to lights in the sky type thing, but have you ever had some other government agency come out and say, hey, we'll take it from here, or don't worry about this, or anything like that?
The only time I've run into that, and it really wasn't, you normally, when you go to a call like that continuously, unless you really find where somebody tried to break in, you don't really generate a report. I mean, there'll be, of course, where the people call in on 911, and it'll be in what they call the CAD system, whatever they tell the dispatcher will put in. But unless there's really a confirmed incident where we found something physical more than a rock thrown, but we could see where somebody actually tried to leave tool marks and try to gain physical entry, or there's a lot of physical evidence, normally, at least around here, nobody really will generate a report. If you start taking pictures of tracks or handprints, like I said, the one guy took a picture of the handprint, one of the other deputies, and he did generate a report on it. But he had to because it was there. I don't believe that occurred. The only thing that I can remember having an outside government agency that I didn't, like I said, we're pretty close to the Appalachian Trail, and we have people go missing all the time. And a lot of time on the Blue Ridge Parkway, they'll leave it up to the local jurisdictions to deal with whatever goes on, believe it or not, even though they have park rangers. If they find a body up there, the local jurisdictions will be the one who takes it. So if you look for a homicide on the Blue Ridge Parkway and look for the stats, you may not find very many stats on the parkway, but you would have to actually go to each of the individual jurisdictions that correspond to find the stats, if that makes sense. It's kind of the way they're playing the shell. They're kind of playing the shell game, where look, we have a safe park. We've had one homicide in the last 10 years, when one county may have worked 4 in the last 3, but it's fallen to the local jurisdiction. And normally that's the same way with missing hikers. The local volunteer fire departments will set up a command post at their fire department or the rescue squad, and they'll call in the volunteers who do the search and rescue throughout the region, and they'll come in. They have a grid search, and that's what they do, is search and rescue. And the sheriff's department or the local police department usually has to supply at least one person as a liaison at the command post, as long as it's there. I do remember one time, probably 4 years ago, like I said, there's normally 4 or 5 command posts here get set up, and you got a guy up here, and if you're slow, you might slide in there and talk to them if they found the people yet. I remember going one time, and there was 2 guys, and I didn't remember this till I actually heard one of y'all's podcasts, where it kind of struck me. I may have seen these 2 guys that
the same 2 guys.
About. They were in I want to say a dark blue Yukon or Suburban. They're both white guys in their 40s to 50s. They were inside the command post, which was just inside like the engine bay of like the little volunteer fire department. But I remember they were standing off to themselves, and they just would only kind of talk to like the National Park Service liaison. And I, being good cops, I'm like, who the hell are those guys? And the deputy's like, oh, here's what they are. They just here. They don't even talk to us. They're just something to do with the National Park Service. And of course, I kind of said, okay, and we went on to talk about something else. And when I went out, I remember going out 15, 20 minutes later, going back into my patrol car, that they were getting into a dark blue Suburban Yukon. And it had government plates, federal government plates, GOV plates. I noticed that. And I drove off, and I didn't really think any more about it till I heard some of your people on your podcast saying, hey, these guys have approached us, you might want to forget what you saw. They didn't do any of that to us, but I remember they weren't real engaged. They just kind of stood in the corner, spoke to themselves, talked amongst themselves, and kind of every now and then would kind of go over and begrudgingly talk to the National Park Service guy who would come over and talk to one of the volunteers.
I was going to say, do you recall if one guy was sort of clean cut and dressed better and the other one sort of like Grizzly Adams?
Seemed like one guy did have a beard, but it wasn't like your Grizzly Adams beard. It wasn't like your Duck Dynasty deal. He had a beard. But both of them were dressed, normal fit attire. They had, the khaki 511 pants.
The guy with the beard, was he a big guy?
Yeah, I wouldn't say he was 6. I'm 6'2", 240. He was taller than me, a little bigger than me.
Yeah,
That was the beard was. The other guy was kind of small. Actually, the other guy was kind of small. He was probably 5'7", maybe 170 pounds, maybe. But they were in their 40s.
Yeah, that's a description we had before.
Well, and like I said, they didn't even cross my mind until one day I was driving. And like I said, I kind of listen to y'all's podcast when I'm at work, while I'm driving around. You know, I just kind of plug it into my radio and listen to it. And when I heard that, I really didn't even cross my mind at first. I was probably 2 more miles down the road, further into your podcast, and was like, wait a minute, I might have seen these guys. And that would have been 5 or 6 years ago. It would have been maybe 2009, 2010, somewhere in July or August. Because it was summer, it was hot. I remember it was hot. Everybody was in short sleeves. And these guys were like in your normal 5'11" khakis, like a button-down shirt. One guy did have a beard, but it wasn't real long. But he had a little bit longer hair. But the other guy was kind of GI looking, military looking.
Yeah, I think the Grizzly Adams was just kind of a generalistic description, but the description you gave is exactly what we've heard a few different times.
Really, and that's what
even the clothing.
And that's when I started thinking, maybe that was something at those people's house that night, because why would these guys be in this area?
Exactly.
When I heard that, I was like I said, it really didn't even strike me when I first heard the description. And I was probably 3 or 4 miles down the road after I'd heard it, and I thought, wait a minute. I remember guys like that. And then that's when I went back and thought, I did see guys that matched that description. At least the one guy with the beard stood out. But they were in a real dark blue Suburban. It wasn't black. I remember it was dark blue. And or Yukon. And it did have federal government plates. Like new Army recruiters have on their tags, on their vehicles, something like that. Yeah, I did run into them guys. And it may not be the same fellas, but they just didn't fit in.
Sounds like it.
Well, they didn't fit in with anyone else.
Right.
Even with the Park Service people, they were kind of begrudgingly talking to them, because you can tell by the body language. And they kind of looked put off to be there in the first place. And I was like, they're just, me and the other deputy, they're just probably 2 supervisors from where their little hid district is, and they don't want to be down here. But it could have been the same guys. Could have very easily been the same guys, to be honest with you. I've never seen them again, though, and I've been to several command posts since. I've never seen them again. I've only seen them the one time. And like I said, they were there maybe a half hour before I got there. So I talked to them, and they left they were getting in their vehicle when I was driving out. So they were probably left like a few minutes after I did. And like I said, I've never seen them again, so I don't know.
Was that for a missing person? You guys were all gathered together for
Yeah. It was what they do. They'll set up they'll call everybody into a command post. Like they'll usually use a rescue squad or a fire department. And the search teams, they have regional search teams, and they'll go out, and they all, they'll get their typo maps and have their grid searches, and they'll have teams, and they'll go out, and they search different sections, and then they clear the area, and they'll come back, and they'll go back to another section. And that was always for a missing person. It's always somebody on the Appalachian Trail that somebody's mom thinks they're overdue, or somebody's husband was supposed to be back by now, and he hasn't been back, that type of deal. We find bodies on that. People end up dead up there a lot. In fact, I remember just last year we had a guy die on the adjoining county to us, a corresponding county that was on the Appalachian Trail. And I think it was ruled homicide. I don't believe they've been able to narrow it down to who could have done it. I think, that was last year. Yeah, there was a young man in his 20s. They found his body up there. He was you could tell he was a hiker. He'd been up there for days. But I don't believe they've been able to find anything else. But I believe they did rule it a homicide. So it does happen. We find them all the time. But as I said, they play the shell game. They kind of funnel it through off them to the local jurisdiction. So they have a safe park. Please come spend your money. That's what I've noticed.
That's very interesting. I guess you just have to know where to look.
Right. You have to know to look. And like I heard what the Missing 411, I guess the guy wrote that book. It's funny. I have a friend. Well, I had a friend, but he's a coworker, and he back in the 90s worked for the National Park Service. He actually was a park ranger here and out at Mesa Verde, I guess, in New Mexico, wherever that's at. And he's told me how it kind of works. He's kind of given me some inside baseball on how the park police will, the park rangers, how they can move incidents around to make it so they don't buy the stat. We were talking the other day, and and I don't want to put him in it, but we were talking about the subject of Sasquatch and Bigfoot, and he looked me, and he's from this area originally, more Southwest Virginia, but like I said, back in the 90s, he worked for the Park Service here in Virginia, in North Carolina, and out in New Mexico. He quite frankly told me, he said, I know Bigfoot exists. He said, I've never seen it, but everybody in the Park Service knows it exists. And I said, do what? He said, I'm telling you it exists. He said, and I'm going to relay a story that he just relayed to me maybe 3 days ago. So it kind of caught me off guard. He was a park ranger back in Mesa Verde back in the mid-90s, like 94, 95. He says every day back then that they had this thing called the Daily Ranger Report that went out to all the local areas. And I hope I'm, recounting the story right. But it would go back all around the country from different serious reports that happened at different national parks. And he said he remembers reading one of them that was generated from Glacier National Park. I guess that's in Montana or Wyoming somewhere. That they had some fatalities at one of their campsites there that they had ruled it to be a Bigfoot, and that was written in the report. Of course, he just read it, and, everybody kind of knows it. And I said, why didn't you keep a copy of that thing? He said, well, I never thought it would be in it. But if we could find a copy, and he's trying to get a hold of some of his old friends to see if he can look in some archives. But of course, this guy's a police officer. I've known him for a long time. He's honest. This guy's not one to, people will exaggerate and embellish things. This guy's not normally that type of guy. And he says, I'm telling you, I read it that he said it was 94 or 95. He goes, I was in Mesa Verde, New Mexico, wherever that's at. That from Glacier National Park, they said in the report they were fatalities as a result of a Bigfoot attack.
Wow.
And I thought, your kid, yeah, he said, Trey, I'm telling you the truth. So we both immediately got on the computers and started Googling and trying to see what we could dig up. And like I said, he's trying to make contact with some of his old friends that still may be in the Park Service that could maybe get the archive. But he was like, look, I'm telling you it exists because everybody in the Park Service knows it exists. He said everybody in management level in the National Park Service knows it exists. And he told me, how they do between the national parks. I guess they're under the Department of the Interior, and the national forests are under the Department of Agriculture.
Right.
How they can shell game each other. They can, most people think it's all one thing, and I really thought it was all one thing. He said, no, it's, they report to two completely separate departments in the federal government. I said, well, I guess I could see where they do that. But he was very truthful when he said, hey, I'm telling you, I read the report. So if you got anybody that y'all know that can have access to that type of information, look around 94 or 95 Glacier National Park. That report was sent out to all maybe all the national parks west of the Mississippi.
Yeah, it doesn't shock me a whole lot. I think that people might be shocked to find out there's probably a lot of those reports out there that aren't public that almost state the same thing. That's pretty amazing, though. A park ranger came forward. You said he was a park ranger?
Well, yes. He works with me now, but he was a park ranger then. He's a fellow officer now. Me and him worked a shift the other night, and I've known him for several years. And he's from Southwest Virginia, which is about 3 hours from here to right in Mountainous area. And he first went to he wanted to be a park ranger, and he went to their academy, and he worked at a couple of national parks here, and then he was sent out to Mesa Verde out west a couple of places, and then he decided he didn't want to do it. He just wanted to be a local police officer, so he came back here and got a job here. And we were discussing it the other day, and I was talking about Bigfoot, and he said, yeah. I said, well, you used to work for the Park Service. Did you ever see Bigfoot? Just kind of half jokingly. And he said, well, they exist. And I thought, what? And he was dead serious. He said, I'm serious. I know they exist. He said, I've never seen one, but all management levels in the National Park Service know they exist. It's just part of life. Everybody denies. And then he went on to recount the story of what he read at Glacier National Park. And I was thinking,
Do you think he would? Do you think he'd talk to us?
he may. I got to work with him tomorrow night. We got to do some work tomorrow night. So yeah, I will talk to him and see what he says.
Okay, great.
And he's a
Be very
and
interesting.
like I said, I know the fellas that have the war stories and embellish everything. He's not usually one of them. He doesn't strike. He never struck me as that kind of guy. I believed him when he said, I read this report. It said Bigfoot. And I said, why didn't you keep it? He said, I just never thought it would be anything. Of course, when you look at things that, at the time, you never think, I should really make a copy of this, put it in my back pocket.
Right,
For 20
right.
years from now to pull it back out. And I thought, well, you're right. I guess I see what you're saying. But only people that were in the parks or in the National Park Police would have saw these reports.
Yeah, so a very limited group of people.
And he said they were daily reports. They're called the Daily Ranger Report. At least that's what they were called then. And they were before email, so they were faxed. He said he remembers them being faxed every day because it was before email would come out or the website where you could just check up on a message board or something. They were, when the old fax chains, they came out and they faxed, and you would get copies of the more serious reports, I guess, from different geographic areas, maybe the ones you were close to, what happened the day before or the 2 days before. But he said they came out every day. Like I said, I don't know how true that is. I've never worked for him, but he was pretty steadfast in what he was saying.
Yeah, a lot of guys in law enforcement, even park services, are very matter of fact. I don't think I've come across one yet that gave a super elaborate story. Usually it's very, just like your story, Tria. Usually it's straight to the point. This happened, this happened, this happened. Here's what I thought, and that's it. I mean, rarely do I don't think I've ever come across a guy in law enforcement. It's almost like you guys aren't wired that way. You guys are very matter of fact, very logical, very,
Well, you've been in it for a while. You usually deal with when you're testifying in court, you kind of really have to be very matter of fact, very short to the point. And normally that's how most of us probably, at least I do, relay information like that. It's not really a lot of room for conjecture in it. This is what I saw. This is what happened. Did I see a creature? No. Did I smell what I smelled? Yes. Did I see with the rocks and those type of things when you could see where rocks had been thrown? Yes. Did it creep me out for for lack of a better word? Yes, it did. And that's the way with my coworker when he talks about when he saw the report from Glacier, and he said he remembers Glacier National Park. He remembers it. It said Bigfoot. It actually says that in the report.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like Will and I getting these different stories from law enforcement people. People, I don't know if people think we're making conspiracy theories up, but the point is we're getting this information from law enforcement,
Right.
And it's consistent. It's consistent across the board. I think when like the Grizzly Adams, did he have a Grizzly Adams type beard? I think a lot of law enforcement guys look at that and go, well, if the guy had I've heard Hell's Angel, I've heard.
Yeah, I think that's just how they're relating.
How they're relating it. Yeah. And it's usually he's a pretty big guy. And it's funny you mentioned the other guy because the other guy isn't mentioned to be real big, 5'7", 5'8", usually in a suit. Right. Usually they're dressed a little different. Not always, but a lot of times they are. And usually the guy in the suit and has a military cut, usually he's kind of he's the good cop. And the larger guy, usually he's the bad cop whenever they're talking with people.
And they could have played those roles, but I never really engaged them. They may have done that with the other people, some of the other searchers or maybe the rescue squad, the people that were doing the searches or people running the command. They may have acted like that. I never really engaged them. I do remember the big guy. He was good size. He was bigger than me, and I'm pretty good size. But it wasn't a long beard. It wasn't the grizzly. It was not, nice done nice, but it wasn't like your Duck Dynasty looking Hell's Angel beard either. Sure. But the other guy, he was smaller in stature, and he did have the GI look to him. The polished boots and that type of deal. The other guy didn't. but they were dressed similar. They were wearing, the khaki 9/11 pants. I remember that standing out because I'm thinking, why? Because that struck me because I'd actually spent 2 weeks at the FBI Academy a few years ago, and I remember looking at the exact same pants. But why do all these kids wear the same pants? They must get them from the same size. And that stuck out in my mind. It's every fit, whether it's the FBI or DEA or whoever, or even these. I'm like, even these guys are wearing the same type of 9/11 range pants, or 5/11 range pants. I'm sorry. That's what stuck out in my mind. That's really why I noticed them. But yeah, man, that's what I've got. That's my story. And like I said, I will talk to my coworker and see if he'll relay the story to y'all about what he read back in the 90s.
Yeah, fascinating accounts.
Well, it's not as good as something, but it happened. I mean, that's exactly how it went down, and to this day, I remember that. I'm like, had we just pushed a little further, I may have seen one. Not that I know if I really want to see one or not, but I had done some. Of course, since then, I've looked on the BFRO site, and there's a few sites. There's 4 or 5 sightings around within 50 miles of here, but who knows about the BFRO site? They kind of strike me as, I don't know. I ain't gonna get mad. If that television,
not very professional.
If that my kids are. I have an 11 and 8-year-old boy, so they love like Survivor Man and they love Bear Grylls and those type of shows. So when Finding Bigfoot came out, they were all about that show. And I watched a few episodes. I'm going, what are they hunting? They're making so much noise. They're not going to walk up on anything. I mean, no. I watched a couple of the first episodes. I remember watching one with my kids almost the second or third season. They had like a strobe light or they were playing music.
Disco lights or some other stuff, yeah.
What are they hunting? I mean, they're not hunting an animal. So, no, I don't have a whole lot. But like I said, I've only watched the show a few times. But what I saw of it, they're not hunting. They're doing something. I don't know what they're doing, but they're not looking for an animal in the woods.
No, they're not.
But thank you for actually listening to what I'm glad you I got to talk here because I feel better, actually.
It's really therapeutic to get it off your chest. I mean, whether you've had a direct encounter or a peripheral one, with all the other things without actually seeing one, it is very therapeutic to get it off your chest. We hear it time and again, and Wes and I both know that from, our own experiences.
Well, I do. I appreciate you letting me be on your show. I really do.
Oh, thank you, Trio. The pleasure was ours.
And you
thanks
have
for
a good
coming
podcast.
on.
Like, I found it over the summer, and I was like, man, this is a good show. I mean, this is a great podcast. I can ride around and listen to this at work, and it gives me something to listen to other than the radio.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.